Good day, all, and welcome once again to the Gritty Tales Writing Vlog. I am your host, Tyler M Mathis, as always, and today I'm going to vent a bit about a triumvirate that is detrimental to the writing profession: scammers, posers, and their enablers. While surfing around in writing groups, I have become sick unto death with these people, particularly the posers and enablers, because they are the ones causing the most damage to the writing profession. The scammers, meanwhile, just target individual writers. So let's dive in by discussing the least of these three evils: the scammer. Writers tend to be learned people. We read frequently and usually have at least some experience in higher education, and often a university degree. Collectively, we're not dumb people by any stretch. However, the writer's background in formal education also harms him in one aspect. College is a relatively coddling environment, free for the most part from criminality, and students become accustomed to living in a high-trust society. That is not how the real world works, however. Out here, the lower elements of society are trying to take everything you have so they can make a living by putting forth minimal effort. And those accustomed to a high-trust society, such as former collegians, will often fall for these scams, not because they're stupid, but because they become blindly trusting during their time living in the high-trust environment of college. And if that isn't enough to make them easy marks for scammers, toss in the desperation factor. Aspiring writers start at the bottom with dreams of reaching the top, and they usually start by writing a novel, which, as an aside, is the wrong move, as I discussed in vlog number 3. Nevertheless, I started out the same way, and like almost every other author who produced a novel straight out of the gate, the weight of my delusion, that all I had to do was write a book to be a successful author, absolutely crushed me in the aftermath, when no publisher would accept my novel and no one purchased when I self-published. New writers become desperate in this situation. They'll try anything to sell books. They see a post in a writing group that might read something like this: "Great authors, do wish you more sales of you book? Drop you link below, free promotion." This is just an example, and I didn't read it incorrectly. Scam posts are rarely written in proper English. Now ask yourself, why would a writer, someone who aspires to make a living in a profession governed by proper English, link their self-published book below such a poorly written post? The answer, of course, is desperation. When people calling themselves editors advertise their services, again in improper English, which is kind of a red flag, for an editor, don't you think? These same desperate writers will reply with "interested" and "how much do you charge?" They're completely oblivious to these scams, desperate for anything that might sell another book. And what happens when writers fall for the editor scams? Well, at best they get a shitty editing job from someone in India or Nigeria who barely speaks or writes English. I can only imagine how those manuscripts are butchered. At worst, their books are stolen and self-published by the scammer. Try claiming plagiarism if that happens, and against someone in a foreign country. You won't get anywhere, so don't bother. As for the drop your link scam, the author will soon be contacted by a publishing company, woo, who has accepted their book. Yay! What luck! Your genius finally being recognized, and you never even submitted a story. Imagine that, right? Too bad these are vanity publishers, and while they'll gladly publish your book, they'll charge you top dollar for the privilege. Of course, they'll promise all sorts of aid: promotional help, a free editing job, reviews by alleged professional writers, etc. But vanity publishing, which was once a legit business, is now nothing but a scam to drain desperate writers of their money. I see posts all the time from authors contacted by these companies. They get their hopes up, only to have them dashed when they realize they're being had, and all because they were so desperate to sell that they gullibly dropped their link in a scam post. Recall at the beginning that I labeled scammers the least of these three evils. They sound like the worst of them, however, do they not? Well, evil though they are not the worst, because they're easily avoided. Just don't drop your links in their posts. And if you see advertisements for promo services or editing that contain improper English, see those dead giveaways for what they are and move on. And avoid any ad that guarantees publication. Those are always going to be vanity presses. No true publisher charges you for publication. To be traditionally published, you submit your book or short story, and if it's accepted and published, they pay you, not the other way around. It's that simple. And that's why scammers are the least of the three evils. So don't be a desperate, gullible schnook who falls for these cons. Poor English and impossible promises are the hallmark of the scammer. Just use common sense and scammers become a non-issue. Now let's talk a bit about posers. I need not consult Urban Dictionary for the definition of poser. The word originated during my youth in the late 80s. Mostly it was used by skaters to describe someone who posed as one of them to be cool, not because they liked skateboarding or were any good at it. Of course, the poser label can be applied in any social circle or interest, and quite a few writers qualify. They try to perpetrate, another verb that hit the vernacular during the 80s and has since disappeared. Anybody remember Don't Believe the Hype? I'll quit dating myself now and get to the point. Posers in any walk of life share one common trait. Something is missing from their lives. And that something is meaning, which can only be found in one's true calling. So the poser grabs onto something that might or might not truly interest him, just to be part of that thing. Unfortunately, most don't want to work to develop their interest or fit in. They only want unconditional acceptance. The poser is often mistaken for just another newbie writer, but the differences are easy to identify. The reddest of their flags is laziness. They want lots of attention, but they don't want to work. They post questions in groups that could easily be answered with a simple Google search. If someone can't bother to open an app and type in a simple question, then how will they conduct all of the necessary research to write a novel or even a short story? The answer is they can't, and it's not their intention to anyway. They just want their squeaks oiled, and they find their lubricant among writers who refuse to see them for what they are. Those are the enablers. We'll get to them momentarily. Another type of poser is someone who writes horribly and never gets any better. They lack the innate talent that anyone needs to excel in any field. Now, I'm not slamming them for making the effort, nor for failing dozens of times. Trying is how you find out if an endeavor is for you. If you're improving, you stick with it. If not, that endeavor isn't your thing and you should move on. These types of posers refuse to move on, however, because they lack the ability to honestly self-evaluate. They keep on keeping on instead of trying something else that interests them that they might be good at. Both poser types also keep up the facade because they think there's the old pot of gold at the end of the rainbow just sitting there waiting for them. Newsflash, not going to happen. It doesn't happen for most talented writers, and it will never happen for the poser. Posers are worse than scammers because they form the mass of your unworthy competition. If you're a talented writer, ask yourself this: Why is it so difficult to become traditionally published? I know the reasons are many, but the poser factor comes into play. Editors read submissions all day, usually just the first couple of paragraphs in each story because probably 90% of the subs are garbage from letter one. Now, some of these submissions are from sincere new writers who are honestly trying, but they've yet to develop their talent. But many are from posers who have been cluttering inboxes for years with their dross, and who refuse to accept reality. So guess what happens by about 10 o'clock or so after the editor has endured a dozen of these terribly written stories? He's feeling a little jaded by the time he gets to yours. And if just a little something is off in your prose, something that could easily be fixed during editing for publication, then your story winds up in the garbage too. These editors' inboxes are so overflowing with bullshit that sometimes your diamond in the dung is going to be overlooked out of hand. And that's sad because it's one thing for your story to be rejected because it's not up to standard, but another when a weary editor doesn't consider your work with an open mind because of the crap he's been subjected to on a daily basis. Look, I might get slammed over labeling people who try over and over to write as posers, but it's true. So I'll give you an example of self-evaluation of talent from my life. I grew up shooting pool. I'm the sort of player who, to the layman, is good. I could beat all of my friends almost all of the time. But against real players, I was a chump. I tried to get better, but I'd reached my plateau and found it impossible to progress further. I lacked the coordination to perfect my cue stroke to unfailing consistency. I couldn't control cue ball speed properly, and the finer points of position play were lost on me. After a period of spinning my wheels in the mud, or rather my balls on the cloth, I gave it up and moved on. That doesn't mean that I don't shoot pool now and again, because I still enjoy it. I just gave up on competitive play in the tournaments that I never came close to winning. I stopped being a poser, in other words. I quit trying to perpetrate and be something I'm not. Pool is not my game. Writing is. The poser needs to find his game and stop cluttering the writing scene. Their presence makes life more difficult for actual writers, and they're not doing themselves any favors by hanging on to an impossible dream. Case closed on the poser class. And now we come to the most destructive of the enemies within the writing community, the enablers. By rough definition, an enabler permits, encourages, and often helps deleterious behavior. Ever watch one of those shows about the 600-pound plus morons who are eating themselves to death? They didn't get that way all on their own. Because at about the 500-pound mark, they lost the ability to walk. By rights, they should have lost weight through starvation after that. Yet they're still in that bed eating because of their enablers, all relatives and friends, who continue to ply them with buckets of fried chicken and the countless pizzas they crave. An enabler of any sort is a toxic individual. Some enablers are malicious. They want to betray and injure the people they're helping, probably because it's a power trip and they like feeling important. After all, how can the 600-pound man survive if not for the enabler's caring and generosity? Most enablers aren't truly evil, however, but they are obtuse, and enabling is a form of virtue signaling as well. It's this second type of enablers who proliferate in the writing community. The enabler is the worst because he degrades the writing profession, usually without even realizing it. Some are even decent writers, and a few are working professionals. That's the worst part. So why would they choose to enable? We'll get into that, but first I'll explain their MO and how they harm the writing profession. Let's say some lazy poser is asking inane questions in a group when he could have Googled the answers in 5 seconds. You're tired of seeing their bullshit posts, so you tell them to stop being lazy and look it up themselves. You tell them to act like a real writer, in other words. Guess what often happens? Some enabler responds with something like, "Hey, he's trying. Stop being arrogant toward new writers. Your post should be removed." Something like that. I recently received just such a comical scolding in a group. Some clown asked for help consolidating his stories into a screenplay. This guy was obviously not a native English speaker. He wrote his post at roughly a first grade level. So the poster was an obvious poser. Now, I'm not saying people who grew up reading and writing a foreign language can't learn to write in proper English, but it takes years of training and a knack for languages to do so, and this guy just wasn't at that level. Someone called out his incoherence and I agreed, responding I was shocked that anyone would take such a post seriously. Not only did enablers roast me for that innocuous comment, but they said it should be removed and probably complained to the moderator, because you guessed it, it was taken down, and all because I told the truth in so many words, that someone at that low level of writing skill has no business writing screenplays. "He's trying," they say. No, he is not trying. He's either a poser living a delusion or trying to get rich by having one of you idiots do his work for him. But instead of politely acknowledging the truth and suggest that maybe he go back to English class for a few years, the enablers take his questions seriously, like he's a competent writer. Who does that help? The answer is nobody. The screenplay guy isn't going to improve without a working knowledge of English. All the enablers did was fuel his delusions of grandeur. That's not doing the guy a favor. It's harming his chances, if he has chances to begin with. Not one enabler suggested that maybe he'd become proficient writing in his own language before tackling English, which is probably the best suggestion for someone like that. But oh no, instead it's, "You're getting there, keep trying, and don't listen to the haters." All of that is virtue signaling. It makes the enablers feel good to allegedly help one of these downtrodden members of the writing community. "We're under the big tent. Come on in. You can be a writer if you just keep trying." Look, we've gone over this before. Not everyone is cut out to be a writer, just like not everyone can become a pro athlete or an astronaut. The enabler refuses to acknowledge that, however. They tell everyone that they can be a writer through countless repetitions of sitting in a chair and just trying really hard. And that is how they degrade our profession, by welcoming those who would be better off somewhere else. I find that downright offensive. In what other profession does this sort of enabling take place? Not one that I can think of. How do you think a group of attorneys would respond to someone who posted at a first grade reading level in their group, claiming to be a legit lawyer? They'd ridicule his sorry ass right off the internet. Or how about this in a music group? "Hey, I'm a musician, check out this performance." Then the guy plays chopsticks on a piano, and poorly at that. He would be laughed into oblivion. Well, appallingly bad writing from someone who hasn't learned English well enough is our version of the chopsticks guy. Yet for some reason, he's welcomed by many in our community. I have no problem with an aspiring writer who appears to know the basics of English and is willing to learn. I've helped some of them, and most of my vlogs are written to answer their questions. But you don't enable scammers and posers just to make yourself feel better. What the enabler should be doing is demanding better and speaking the truth. That is, instructing the writer on how to improve his skill, if indeed it can be improved. The most ass-burning instance of enabling I remember is some idiot who couldn't compose a sentence advertising his ghostwriting services. Well, I tore this ghostwriter a new asshole. You don't perpetrate in my profession, people. I won't stand for it. I work too damned hard to get where I am, so no. Not going to happen. So the moderator turned off commenting for the post, which was the right thing to do. However, then he messages me and basically says tone it down, that I wasn't being respectful. Respectful, all right. Like the respect shown by this clown ghostwriter presuming to be in my profession. Needless to say, that moderator was and still is an enabler. He was the one who removed my comment about the poser screenwriter just the other day. If you're a decent writer, you can tell who is for real and who's perpetrating. It's an observational skill we inevitably pick up. You can't help it. If you're an enabler, you think you're doing the right thing, but you're wrong. You're not helping anyone by telling them their writing is coming along when it's total slop. What you are doing is fueling dreams that will not come true. Lying to people, basically. You're keeping them from moving on and eventually finding a skill that they can excel in, because we're all good at something. I'm not saying be nasty to people, though I'll always rip anyone who falsely claims to be a ghostwriter. But tell the damn truth for once. Then and only then will you, the enabler, actually assist someone. Stop tearing down our profession, perhaps by remembering that it's your profession as well. And that's a wrap on my tirade against the enemy triumvirate. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links below to my books, the Gritty Tales writing group on Facebook, and my Amazon author page. Thank you for watching. That is all.